Hey guys, it's Rudy here, and we're getting a little bit of air back through the return jets and into the pool. So it's a constant stream of air bubbles. Because it's a constant stream of air bubbles throughout the entirety of the time the system's running, we know that that has to be a suction side leak. So it has to be somewhere between here and either the skimmer or the main drain. So we're gonna go through a few different things, but again, a suction side leak always has to be between the pump and then on the suction side, and an indication of, again, air bubbles continuously flowing through the returns the entirety of the time the system is operating. That's indicative of a suction side leak. If the air bubbles had subsided after a couple of hours, then that would lend more toward a pressure side leak. Pressure side leak will typically only drip water when the pump is running, but once the pump stops, it'll suck in air from wherever that leak was. A suction side leak, now that's only going to draw in air while the pump is running, with one exception, and we'll talk about that too. So I'm going to get off the ground here. It's 105 degrees out. We're going to go into my shop. I have a motor in there, but I'll show you some different things that we can check. And hopefully, if you have air bubbles coming through your system, through your returns, we can get that resolved for you pretty quickly.
Check the easy things first. Make sure your pool has enough water in it, especially if you have a through-the-wall skimmer. If the water level is low, it can actually create a little bit of a vortex that'll draw air right in through the plumbing. Let's make sure that that's not the cause before we jump into all of this. So check that. We also want to make sure that the pump isn't cavitating. When I say cavitating, that would be something slowing down the speed of the water to the impeller. That's a whole other video, and we will talk about cavitation, but check your skimmer basket, check your pump basket, make sure that you don't accidentally have any of your valves in front of the pump closed more than they should be, or all the way. That will slow down the flow, and that would cause that to happen and start to sound like there's marbles in the plumbing and all that good stuff. So check the water level, make sure that everything has a free flow. We get a constant stream of air bubbles back through the return lines. Again, an indication of a suction side leak has to be somewhere between here and the pool itself. One of the things about a suction side leak is it will only draw in air. It will not drip water, with one exception. So when the pump is running, it will only drip or draw in air. And like I said, there'll be one exception, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. Pressure side leak, that will only drip water, but as soon as the pump shuts off, wherever it was dripping from, it'll suck the air in. That's why it only lasts for a few hours, because eventually it will work the bubbles out of the system. Whereas a suction side leak, it will not. It just has that constant draw of air. It's just a lot easier to pull in air from a leak somewhere where there's a break in the seal versus pulling water all the way from the pool. So it makes sense. So check the easy things first. Most pumps nowadays are manufactured with a clear Lexan lid. These can develop hairline cracks. So if this develops a crack, the solution's simple: replace the lid. Sometimes they can be difficult to see, so take the lid off with the pump off. Take the lid off, hold it up to the light. See if you can see any cracks in there. If you can see a crack in there, the solution's simple: we replace the lid. If there's no cracks in there, it's okay to put it right back in place. But before we do that, we want to take a look at this O-ring that's beneath the lid. If this O-ring is starting to fail, you'll see that it's developed cracks or it's flattened out. If that's the case, then we want to replace the O-ring. If it looks in good shape, we'll just make sure that it's been lubricated. We want to lubricate these things every time that lid comes off. To do that, we want to use a silicone or Teflon-based lubricant. We don't want to ever use a petroleum product like Vaseline or anything along those lines. Petroleum products do degrade rubber, so you'll go through more O-rings and gaskets over time. So when we lube this, we only want to just put a dab on it, just a little bit of a sheen. A dab will do you. Want to glop it on and slime it all over the place. So after that, if the O-ring needs to be replaced, we replace it, make sure we lubricate it. If it's in good shape, we'll lube it back up, put it into place. Before we put the lid on, take a look at your fingertips. If your fingertips have turned black from handling that O-ring, you'll want to replace it. It means that it's starting to degrade. This is another common place where you can see a fail and draw in air. Sometimes when you shut the pump off, if this O-ring has failed, you'll see it spit a little bit of water out. That's also an indication that this gasket needs to be replaced. But if we've had to replace it, or it's the same one, if we're still seeing the issue, the next thing I want to check is my mechanical seal, my pump seal. Now, I said there was one exception to drawing in air, and dripping water. The pump seal is the only point that will actually do both, draw in air and drip water. Every other place that you can have a suction side leak will only draw in air. The pump seal is also the furthest point back in the system where you can have a suction side leak. So if I take my pump here, this is the impeller. That's the part of the pump that actually throws the water. This spring-loaded piece behind here, that's your pump seal. The pump seal is the furthest point back in the system that you could have a suction side leak. It's also the only place in the system where you can have a suction side leak that'll draw in air and drip water. All the remainder of the suction side leaks you could possibly have from the pump housing forward will only draw in air while the pump is running. However, this, if it fails, will allow the system to draw in air and drip water at the same time. The whole purpose of the pump seal is to let the shaft of the motor into the wet end without allowing the water to drip out. So that makes it easy for us to check. So with the pump running now, take a look beneath where the motor mounts to the wet end. What we're looking for is moisture or any dripping or anything along those lines right down in this area. If you see any puddling down there, or sometimes you can actually just see drip, then we know that the pump seal has failed, and the solution then would be to replace the pump seal. And again, that's the furthest point back in the system that we can have a suction side leak. If that looks to be in good shape, the next thing I want to check is my pump housing. I want to give everything a once over, make sure I don't see any visible cracks in my pump housing itself. If we're good there, I want to check my freeze plug. You'll have either one or two depending on the style of pump that you have. You'll always have one in the front. You may also have one on the side. Again, depends on the style of pump. Beneath that, we'll either have Teflon tape or a gasket. Take it off, take a look beneath it, see what you have. This one here, oops, flat gasket inside the cap. We want to make sure that basically it wants to meet all the same criteria as the pump lid O-ring. We want to make sure that it's not flattened out, hasn't developed any cracks, anything along those lines. We can lubricate it. You can replace it just for GP. They're not very expensive. Now, these are for the folks who up north who winterize their pools completely. They have to take these off, the one off of the filter as well. They want to make sure that there's no water, no moisture, whatever, inside their equipment. That way, if the water should freeze, it could actually cause some cracks. So they don't want that. For the folks in the south, these are generally just a place where we can have some suction side leaks. So take it off. If there's Teflon tape beneath it, redo the tape. If all of this looks like it's in good shape, the next thing to check is the plumbing. And that's all that we have left. So depending on what type of system you have, that determines how much plumbing is above ground. If you have a vacuum side filter, you're not going to have as much plumbing on the suction side below ground. If you have an older cinder block field built surge pit, you might not have any plumbing underground. That's awesome for finding a suction side leak because it has to be right there and visible. If it's one of those fiberglass enclosed system, you'll have a little bit of plumbing underground. And of course, if there's direct suction on the pool through the wall skimmer, anything along those lines, then you're going to have a bunch of plumbing underground. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things that we can check before we get to that point. Now, some folks like to use soapy water. I like to use shaving cream. With the pump running, if you spray the shaving cream completely around the joint, I like to start with this one right at the face of the pump first. If I'm drawing it in air from that point, you'll see a very notable funnel right in the shaving cream itself. If I don't see any indication of a suction leak here, I'll go to the next joint, to the next joint, to the next joint until I find the place that I'm drawing in air or I hit the ground. If I hit the ground, then I need to make a decision on how I'm going to roll forward. Most likely I'm going to call a leak detection service. That's a specialty within a specialty field. Those guys really do, guys and gals really do work their magic when they come out looking for leaks underground. So I'll probably lean that way. If your suction side leak is bad enough, your pump will lose its prime while it's running. If it's really bad, you're not going to be able to get this sucker to prime in the first place. Pressure side leak. If a pressure side leak is bad enough, you'll lose your prime when you shut the system off. Now on that side, you're going to have plumbing underground, no matter how your pool is set up. If we're lucky, we can find the dripping in the plumbing that's above ground, again, somewhere between here, the valve, your pressure side filter, if you have a pressure side filter, all the way up to the point where it does get to where it goes underground. So we can take a look and see if we hear the drip. Sometimes when you shut it off, you can actually hear it slurp just a little bit from where it draws the air in. Regardless, if you get to a point where you hit the ground, call a leak detection service, somebody who can come out and take a look at things for you that way. So hopefully this helped send you in the right direction, which way to look for a leak, whether it's on this side or this side, and then some of the different things that we can check. If you guys like the video, definitely subscribe down below to our channel. I'm going to drop a link also for our Pool Operator Talk News site. You can check that out as well. We have a bunch of cool things going on there, some neat stories. We try to have a little bit of everything. So take a peek, let us know what you think. If you don't see something that you want to see, let us know that too, and we'll see if we can't get that together for you. My name is Rudy. I'm with Aquatic Facility Training and Consultants, and this was Troubleshooting a Suction Side Leak. Thanks, and we'll catch you on the next one. Be good.